In today's society, we are aware that sex trafficking exists, but we tend to think it's somewhere else. Sex trafficking is an epidemic in Houston, and it's happening to people like you, in towns like yours. But how can you know? And is there anything you can do about it?
Houston is one of the sex trafficking centers of the world.
I would say that it happens everywhere.
To my knowledge, it is a local issue here in Houston.
So it's both an international issue and a local issue.
It's a really big issue here in Houston, actually. It is domestic for sure, and I'm sure it's even worse in other places.
I have no idea. I've never heard of sex trafficking in Houston.
Sex trafficking is the exploitation, transportation, and buying, I believe, of women in just any gender, really.
It would be kidnapping and exploitation of the people that are taken.
More like a professional broker that lives underground and doesn't really project that whole idea of what a pimp should be.
They don't want to be known. They don't want to look like the role. So I would say they could be anyone.
It's sort of like the movie trope of like very flashy suits and stuff like that.
You know, they like to put on a lot of jewelry. They like to show off what they got.
No gender, there's no race. They could be really anyone.
Young women, young men are those that are gullible.
Obviously female, really poor, very poor upbringing, maybe not so much as a good parental figures in her life.
Be more aware of the topic.
So I would think that if people were just more aware of it, they'd probably be more disgusted than they are.
It'd be not putting yourself in a situation where you're helping people like that, or going into businesses that are known for like combining their businesses with them, like strip clubs.
Make sure that you check, whenever a police pulls you over in case the person's not actually a cop. Don't be out at certain hours and in certain parts of town. And if you ever go out at night to somewhere where you're drinking or something like that, that you pay attention.
From one day to the next, someone could disappear and just immediately be a part of everything that's going on. So, I don't know.
I'm Deputy Volinovich with the Harris County Sheriff's Office, Human Trafficking Division.
I'm Deputy Castro with the Sheriff's Office. I work in the same task force as she does. So Texas alone is a big hub in the United States because of its location. Over the last couple of years, we've always been in the second or first position in the United States, always battling, of course, with California. More recently, we've been kind of in the second spot because of all the resources we've had, the training, the funding that the legislature has provided us. But it is a huge hub because of its location and size. When the public thinks about human trafficking, they think that it's international in nature, that it's not a big domestic issue, when in reality it's a bigger domestic issue than it is international. Smuggling is a crime against a country versus human trafficking is a crime against a person.
I'm Dorothy Strohall, and I am with an organization called Beauty Will Rise, and we are advocates for trafficking victims and educate our community and our youth. We do three things mainly. We do training for community, law professionals, medical professionals, just to really talk about what human trafficking is, what it is not, and how to recognize it. And then once it's recognized, knowing what to do. We also have a youth prevention program. You can see behind me we have this comic book, and so we have a youth prevention program geared towards middle school age and up that really talks about what human trafficking is, shows scenarios in it through a really cool manga style comic book way, and then teaches them what some of the red flags are that predators might use. That way, if they see a red flag, it'll trigger and they'll know, hey, I've seen this before, and they won't be as easily manipulated into it. And then the third thing we do is we are victim advocates. So once a victim has been rescued out of a trafficking situation, police or other agencies will give us a call, and we will help transition that victim either back home, if that is what's healthy for them, or into a long-term recovery center. We also help pay for victims to go to counseling after they've gone into a recovery center so that they can start to manage and deal with their life issues. So sex trafficking in today's world, it looks different than what the stereotype has been made. You know, a pimp walking on the street with his girls, or like if you've seen the movie Taken, that's what everybody relates to sex trafficking. But you've got to look at where the trafficking is happening and the culture that the trafficking is happening in. Sex trafficking here in the U.S. Looks very different than it does in a third world country because our culture is different. There's a legal description and then there's ways that it looks. So the legal description here in the U.S. is any kind of sex acts that is caused or made to happen through force. You have to prove they've either been forced or they've been frauded. In other words, they've been told they were going to do one job and now they're going to do something different. Or there's been coercion, like I have your child and you're not going to be able to take your child unless you go make the rent by turning tricks. So as an adult, if you're over 18, you must prove force, fraud, or coercion. If the trafficking victim is under 18, none of that has to be proven. Any sex act in exchange for money for a child under the age of 18 is considered trafficking. Most of the time, if you have a victim that has been recovered out of trafficking and they are over the age of 18, but they started back before they turned 18, the law is going to go on their side and say the trafficking actually started at this point through this type, and then the force, fraud, and coercion does not have to stand. That being said, most of the time when you have a child that has been brought up, raised, or fallen into trafficking at a young age, they don't realize that it's trafficking. They don't consider themselves victims. This is their normal lifestyle. This is what they've been doing. And at some point, they actually feel like they're making their own choices. They're doing their own decisions and they're living the life they want to live, not realizing that because of the age that they were brought into it, they really didn't have the capability to make that type of decision. In my experience in the trafficking advocacy industry, there is not an age gap on a trafficking victim. I have had a victim from the age of 15 all the way up to 46. It is a vulnerable person who trusted someone who fell into the wrong person at the wrong time and was ushered into it without even realizing it happened. You know, most traffickers aren't necessarily looking for one type of victim. They are looking for anyone who is vulnerable, whether that person needs shelter, whether that person needs food, whether that person needs love, whether that person is feeling lonely, needs affection, needs to be built up. They'll find the vulnerability and then they'll prey on that, luring them into it. You know, sometimes we see things that look just a little off, maybe in a massage parlor. So if you see a massage parlor that is open 24/7, nobody needs a massage 24/7. More than likely that's a front for a brothel. If you see a place that has unusual hours where the windows are blackened out, that type of thing, then you can report and say, hey, I think there might be some suspected trafficking happening here, give them the address, and then they will contact the police and make them do an investigation on it. A lot of times also online, you might see unusual ads or unusual things, get a friend request from someone you don't know that might be looking at your friends group saying, oh, there's a lot of young girls. I think for the general public, it's really about awareness, knowing what it looks like, being aware of it, and then doing something about it. My phrase is everybody can do something. What is your something? Sometimes that something is sharing posts on social media that talks about human trafficking and what that is. Sometimes that something is if you see something unusual or that you think might be a trafficking situation, call your local PD and report it, or call the National Trafficking Hotline. The National Trafficking Hotline disperses out to FBI, local PDs, local advocacy groups to do something when reports are made. So you can call that and it's anonymous. You don't even have to give your name or number. You just give the information that you saw so that they can start to track and log areas where they're getting reports from.
Most of the cases that we see, what is most common in Houston is American girls, and it's not girls who are getting snatched up off the street. It's not girls who are getting kidnapped. It's not like what you see on TV. A lot of cases that we see are girls who don't have a gun held to their head. A lot of times they start off willing to do it, and sometimes, you know, things get really bad. And
this is only what we encounter. This is not what we don't encounter.
January, February, March, we had 95. April, May, June, we had 133. June, July, August, we had 146. October, November, December, we had 118. We get tips of massage parlors, of specific places, different places where they see it's going on. Hotels where it's obvious that, men drive in, they're there an hour, and then they turn around and leave. So we have a bunch of ways that we come across the actual acts themselves. And with that, we can set up stings at specific locations. You can't just go into a massage parlor and raid the place. You actually have to build a case on them. Like, we'll send an undercover deputy to go in there and let them make a case. Same thing with gentlemen's clubs, but we're more on the lines of getting the girls to come talk to us and make sure that none of them are being forced, because sometimes you have a pimp that will drop the girl off at, and we refer to the girls as victims. The pimp will drop the victim off at a strip club and said, get in there and make me money. And with that, then he comes back and he can come in. So he can go in to see if she's working, to see if she's, it's a sad situation. But that's another reason we go in there and we pull these girls to the side and we question them, are you being forced to do this? Usually everybody answers no. I'm not being forced. Ain't no man taking my money. We hear that all the time. When in reality, they're lying, because they know the man outside or waiting on them or around the corner that we don't see.
Or a lot of them have an ego or a pride thing, or he doesn't take it, but she gives it to them because they really don't have a choice. Right. But I think when it comes to stings and operations, the first thing that we look at is a target. So if we are targeting one particular person that we are looking for and are trying to recover or rescue, then we would set up an entire operation based off of that person. See something, say something applies to this, just like it applies to anything else. For my experience, we do get complaints about spas a lot, but when I say see something, say something, I mean other forms of trafficking other than spas. Not that it's any less, but it could be your neighbor. It could be your own kid, your own family member. If you are a church member and you feel like someone in your church is being trafficked or whatever, or if you're a teacher, or, I think just all aspects of human trafficking, that would help a lot.
And the more it's talked about, the more educated people are, the more we can try and overcome this. As parents, they need to get up in their kids' grill, be all over their social media, be all over their Facebook, be all over their Snapchat, be all over all these different websites that they have. They need to get in their kids' business. You get in a video game and you start chatting with somebody and you think it's going to be, some guy that you just want to meet. And then come to find out it's 30, 40-year-old guy that just wants to sell you.
Yeah.
We have the ages here. 1% are under 13. And this is the ones that we personally have come in contact with our human trafficking. Your average age is from 14 to 17. Mm-hmm. The next biggest age group is 18 to 24, and then 25 to 54, and then very small percent is 55 plus. But your 14 to 17-year-olds, these are kids that are running away from home. Everything from privileged houses where they have the whole world handed to them, to kids that are in CPS that have nothing. They're running away from the shelters that they're put in or the CPS custody homes that they are put in, and both of them end up in the exact same position.
And a lot of those girls have already been victimized.
That was my next thing. I have not encountered but one female that was not previously victimized as a child. So even the older prostitutes, the older victims that are being pimped, somewhere along the way, they were already victims of a sexual assault. When we talk to victims that have been pimped out, we have to be very careful as to how, if they refer to the pimp as their boyfriend, then we refer to the pimp as the boyfriend. So we have to use those same words that they use for them not to shut down immediately during our interview, because they will shut down. If you're not going to consider them your boyfriend, you're going to accuse him of being my pimp, then they get mad. We never accuse anybody or attack anybody, because I mean they've already been victimized. They already think they are in a relationship and they're not. So with that said, we will get the information we need, but we have to step lightly. And by the time we're done with our interview, a little light sometimes will come on and be like, oh, maybe he is a pimp.
We either have a gorilla pimp or a Romeo pimp. And the gorilla pimp is the one that beats the girls, like exactly what it sounds like. And then the Romeo pimp is the one that they kind of finesse the girls, make them fall in love, and they have like a dating relationship with these girls. And a lot of our recruiting does happen on social media. But we have ways of recovering stuff that is deleted. So just because it's deleted on your Snapchat doesn't mean that it's deleted, it's still there. So when we have apps like Kik, Instagram, Snapchat, things like that, if we have probable cause to get a search warrant, and then we serve whoever the owner of the app is, and then there's certain stuff that they can recover from the user's accounts that we can use for prosecution and our investigation and things like that. And even phones, just because you deleted it, it comes off your phone. Those items are really critical in our cases because recruitment is done mostly on social media and by electronics. A lot of the prostitution, work is done using electronics. Just because you say you're not a victim doesn't mean that we actually believe it. Sometimes it's not until the very end, when they're done with that situation, that they're like, damn, I can't believe I fell for that, or I can't believe I just did all that. And a lot of them say, why put myself in this situation? It's my fault. I did this. Nobody forced me to do it. I agreed to do it. And it's like, well, to an extent, but someone still took advantage of you, and we have to hold those people accountable too.
And there again, that's why I was stressing, if they say it's a boyfriend, then we go with boyfriend, because
that's what
they don't think they're victims.
At the time. Yeah.
So
sometimes we actually get outcries when someone has had enough and they're willing to talk to us, but that's on their terms. But when we do it on our terms, they get really upset, as you can imagine. Nobody likes being blindsided. So we try, but it doesn't always work out that way. We get a lot of attitude and people getting upset, saying, so you're going to put me in jail, and you're forcing me to do. You can't force me to be done. And I guess there's some truth to that, but we still try. I would like for people to sympathize with people who have been victims of human trafficking, and not just judge them and think that they're in that position because they choose to. If people just sympathize a little bit more when they see like a street prostitute, that adult victim or prostitute was probably at one point a child victim. So I think if we just sympathize a little bit more with victims, then they wouldn't feel so terrible about themselves.
You have to remember where their mindset came from.
Yes.
Previous abuse can also lead to self-worthlessness, where they don't have any self-esteem. They don't feel like they are worth more than, $50. I would like them to leave that room and talk about it. If you don't know, you don't know, but talk about it. They may speak to somebody that's all they're ever going to hear about this, prior to them possibly being a victim. You're around the girls right now that would be thinking about going to the gentlemen's clubs and stuff to work. And at the gentlemen's club, there's as much going on in there as there is on the street. It's just behind closed doors. Nobody's immune to it. It happens to the best of us, and it happens to the worst of us. And who's to judge, right? Information, just get it out there.